from Luke 15. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying,
"This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them."
So he told them this parable.
There was a man who had 2 sons.
The younger of them said to his father,
"Father, give me the share of the wealth that will belong to me."
So he divided his assets between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant region, and there he squandered his wealth in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the region, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that region, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to his senses, he said,
"How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am, dying of hunger. I'll get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.'
So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him.
Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.'
But the father said to his slaves,
'Quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'
And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and as he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on.
He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he's got him back safe and sound.'
Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father,
'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you and have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your assets with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.'
Then the father said to him,
'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'"
Live in charity and steadfast love. Live in charity, God will dwell with you.
You may be seated. This Lenten season, we have 2 themes: acknowledge, absolve, and next week, rejoice and lament. You know, lighthearted things this Lenten season. So today we conclude acknowledge and absolve. And this particular text does a really beautiful job, in my opinion, of capturing those 2 very actions and practices. All 3 of the family members in this particular parable have moments of acknowledge. The father acknowledges what his son has asked of him in receiving his inheritance while he is still alive, and lets him go. The younger son finally acknowledges, maybe I've made some poor choices. I no longer have food in my belly, and yet, as a Jewish man, I am taking care of unclean pigs. And yet, the pigs that are unclean are better than I am. They have food to eat, at least. In some translations, the text actually says when the younger son returns to himself. Our text says when he comes to his senses. But I like the returning to self, because to return to self, you have to know what you've done wrong and what you need to do to make a difference. And so he goes home and he acknowledges that he has sinned against his father and isn't worthy, but maybe his father would consider hiring him to work for him. And then we have the acknowledgement of the older son. And I think this one often gets overlooked because we consider the older son petty or disgruntled or resentful. But many of us have been taught when we feel those things, we keep them inside. We don't say them outside. And some would say, that is the polite thing to do. Don't tell off your father. And maybe the way in which he communicated could have been altered, granted, sure. But he actually told his father for the first time how he felt. He acknowledged that resentment had been building, regardless of what his younger sibling had done. He had held all that in, and he was finally able to acknowledge it. And maybe if he hadn't held it in that long, he wouldn't have told off his dad. That he would have actually had time to practice to say, hey, your younger son just took his inheritance. What is going on? Where's mine? Notice that the younger son says, I could be one of my father's hired hands. And the elder brother says, I have been a slave for you. That's big feelings of dismissal and ignoring that he was finally able to acknowledge. Such an important practice. But you see, only 2 of the family members experience absolve. The father has already absolved his son before he has come, the younger son. In the text, it says, the father saw him before he even approached, which means this father has been keeping vigil ever since the younger son had left, in hopes that maybe, just maybe, he would return home. So you see, absolution reached the son before the son even knew that his father had offered him forgiveness. And as far as we know, the younger son received it. Because he was at the party, he received the goodness that his father has offered him. But the eldest son, his father extends absolution. Son, everything of mine has been yours, always. Everything is yours. But the older son is in a space in life that he cannot receive the absolution he has been given, the grace and mercy. And it could be because that which has been forgiven of his younger brother does not feel just. And when we witness unjust forgiveness, it brings up and builds the resentment we may have already been feeling. And yet, it's still there whether we like it or not. And the older son doesn't get to lean in to the goodness that is taking place in his family. And some of us have been taught that it's because the older brother is like those Pharisees that Jesus is telling this story to, that they can't see the goodness of welcoming everybody. Maybe. But have you ever lived life in such a way that you followed all the rules because you were told it was going to save you, and then those rules didn't save you? That makes absolution and receiving of forgiveness really hard, because it feels like everything has been lied to. And you see, acknowledging and absolve, ooh, they take action. Acknowledging isn't a false, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you felt that way. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were that sensitive. I'm sorry. But that's your stuff. I didn't mean to. I see a lot of reactions, which means you all have been likely on the receiving end of those fake apologies. And as you all have lived out, those fake apologies create a great deal of mistrust and a big heaping of, you better watch out because now we're on it. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're more gracious. Maybe that's how I have lived. Watch out because I got your number now. I ain't going to trust anything that comes out your mouth. And my name better never be in your mouth. Mistrust, right? But acknowledging is not a false apology. Acknowledging requires, ooh, I have caused harm. Even if I didn't mean to, I see my impact. My impact has been painful. And it's not just a, I'm sorry, but a, how can I make amends? How can I make this right between us? You see, the son thought to make amends meant he had to become a hired hand. And the father says, you have returned home. Come, live the way you were invited to live from the beginning. Come. And as far as we know, maybe he did. That grace allowed him to change fully. Absolution, super vulnerable. One, to offer it, to say, I forgive you. You are absolved of all your sins. It's not a power dynamic, right? I don't have the power to absolve you of all things. You have been forgiven since the moment you took breath. My forgiveness is reminding you of who you are and whose you are so you can live into that and sin no more. And to receive forgiveness, especially when we don't feel worthy, oh, goodness. It can feel like we are indebted to the one who has forgiven us. It can feel like we have to keep making amends because what if they don't really mean it? What if I haven't forgiven myself? And so I function from that place of harm in hopes to make it better because I can't trust forgiveness. Accepting forgiveness is so vulnerable because it has to acknowledge that we have done something wrong, but that wrong action does not define us as a person. We are more than the worst we have ever done in the world. And that means we have to allow other people to be made new, to live differently, to give them a second chance. Now, I don't know about you, but if my trust has already been broken, it's really hard for me to trust that somebody's going to do differently. Because I don't want to be made a fool. And yet, the absolution we get from God is just that. The father could be made a fool of. This younger son could come back and destroy everything again. But he's willing to celebrate the coming back because it's that significant of an event. And so you see, as we conclude this particular theme in Lent, acknowledge and absolve. It can heal so much in our lives. To acknowledge when we have caused harm to self, other, or God is a powerful tool. Not because we want to live into guilt and shame, those do not liberate, but to acknowledge that we're actually in relationship and require showing up for each other. Acknowledging when we have seen one another as anything other than beloved. To absolve, whether to give or receive absolution, is a task and practice that is so daunting. And yet, when we live as if we are truly forgiven, we are not defined by our actions alone. We are defined by our belovedness and what can be. And so, as we look at a world that feels like a lot of prodigals, but no returns, it can feel like, what's the purpose? Are we just fools out here, believing that the world can be made well? No, the Father knew exactly what had taken place and knew what was within him to offer. That's the reality of all of this. We have to be able to name where we are in the sins that we have lived into, and to be able to name, I'm not ready to forgive. I want to, but I am not ready. And to be able to work through that. Because the older son wasn't ready, friends. The older son wasn't ready. And yet he was still invited to the banquet. The father went out to him to make sure he knew he was not left out. And that is what all of this is about in community. Is that when we are able to, we show up for each other so that we can heal and acknowledge the harm we have done, intentionally or unintentionally. To acknowledge that we need to continue to grow and heal and be made well. And to acknowledge verbally to one another when we have wronged each other. How many of you have ever received those true I'm sorries? Those true acknowledgments from somebody who has caused you harm? When they finally say, I did wrong by you. How can we make this well? I hurt you. You deserved better. Can you forgive me? If you've received one of those, you also know how transformative that can be. And that is what this theme captures. They were all in our parable still family. And family can be messy. A beautiful, beautiful hot mess. And families are a great place to practice acknowledging and absolving. Because in a world where we don't trust a whole lot, because sometimes the systems and leaders make it really hard to trust things, it can feel too big to acknowledge and absolve the systems of the world. But you know how we still make an impact on those systems? In community. In our little piece of the world we have been given. Anytime we acknowledge the harm we have done or that has been done to us, allowing absolution to be given and received by us we heal a bit of our world. And as each little bit of the world experiences healing, so too do our systems. Because remember, acknowledge does not mean we become fools and just accept behavior. Acknowledging is holding accountable. So you see, the son came back. The father welcomed. The elder son felt dismissed. And as they all move from this parable, they got to live it out. The younger son can't just go, well, Dad forgave me. I get to do whatever I want. Because then he didn't really acknowledge. The father can't then say, hey, remember that time I welcomed you back, open arms? Well, now you owe me this. That is not grace. That is not mercy. And the older son can't ever say to the dad, you never gave me anything. Because the father reminded him he already had it. It wasn't something he needed to give. It just needed to be received. So living this out ain't easy or pretty. It doesn't mean this family became whole and wonderful without issue ever again. And neither will it be for us. It's an invitation to every day, every moment. Acknowledge that God sees you as beloved, to receive it as your absolution from the beginning of time. And as we continue to lean into our absolution, we will be made well together. Because to be forgiven is to be reminded that God sees you far more than any wrong act you have ever done, and invites you to live from a place of hope, peace, joy, and love all your days to come. So as we shift into lament and rejoice, I hope all of us this week can find ways to practice acknowledging what we have done to self, others, and God. And in doing so, create a world of healing by extending absolution to self, others, and God. May you receive the forgiveness that has always been yours since the beginning of time. And may you always receive the name God has given you, beloved. And may you be well as you do. Amen.